Oakland socialists had the opportunity to talk with Denis Pilash of Ukraine's Socialny Ruch, or social movement. We started by talking about the Russian destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam and what's going on with the war in general there in Ukraine at the moment. We also discussed a whole series of other questions. Incidentally, this graph that you're seeing is a graph of the water level at the dam, at the lake behind the dam, in the period leading up to the destruction of the dam. And you can see that Russia, which controls the dam, had allowed the water level to increase to unprecedented levels right before they blew it up. They did that to ensure that the destruction of the dam would cause maximum damage. Here's that discussion with Denis Pilash.
So the Kakhovka Dam, that was this created the water reservoir for millions of people to get water from it, and it's quite essential for the agriculture as well. And blowing it up, it actually triggers this series of events that will lead to even bigger ecological problems in more distant future. So aridization, desertization, and all of this. So this is actually probably one of the worst terroristic acts that were inflicted by the Russian invasion. And well, we can say that we've seen lots of them, from terror attacks on civilian infrastructure and residential buildings all throughout the war. But also this one, it stands out because it's something like we just mentioned, that it's like using weapons of mass destruction without actually using weapons of mass destruction. So the level of the consequences is really astonishing.
Do you think this could be a sign that Putin and the top command are panicking?
Well, it can be, but it also obviously that's no rational decision behind this. So it's quite damning for both Ukrainian and for Russian side, the consequences of it. But actually, if we take into account that Crimea, yes, it's dependent on the water from Dnieper River, but actually they got used to live without this constant supply of water via the northern Crimean canal for years. And now it's said that they have their own reservoirs of water with water enough at least for a year. So it seems that some immediate consequences for the Crimea and Crimean population, they wouldn't be so feasible. And regarding the defensive lines, so Dnieper River is a big defense line, as it was in the Second World War itself. And actually, after they blew up the dam and the water poured to the steppes into the south, so it means that lots of landmines, they were just taken by the water, and now even more area is quite dangerous because of these landmines. They were spread even to bigger extent, and they are also behind below lots of mud and other stuff. So they would be even more difficult to detect them. So this actually means that, and some of the analysts, they say that in a way they prevented Ukrainian side from landing to this left bank of Dnieper River in Kherson region, and so this confines the possible Ukrainian counteroffensive to other three regions, but not Kherson. So, albeit Kherson direction wasn't considered to be a primary one for the Ukrainian counteroffensive, there were more talks about going to the Sea of Azov, to the places like Berdyansk and Nikopol and Mariupol itself. But still, yes, this may, in a way, bring more chaos to the general situation, and maybe win some time, some more time for the Russians to um, prolong this awaiting of the counteroffensive.
Dennis talked about how this was seen in Ukraine as just an extension of the terror bombings and other attacks on the Ukrainian people for months and months and months. He said it just simply strengthened the determination of Ukrainian people to resist the invasion.
It means that yes, we need to resist it with any means possible. And regarding the general military situation, so mostly the situation on all the front lines was stalled. Uh, so the only exception was the Battle of Bakhmut that uh, has been waging for almost a year since. So ultimately, the death toll on the Russian side it's huge, but on the Ukrainian side it's also um, very striking, and we could just see this on the number of obituaries of our friends, comrades, also who lost their lives in the Battle of Bakhmut. I would just mention that just recently we lost our good friend and the author of our journal Commons, journal for social criticism, Evgeny Sievsky, who was a promising young anthropologist, who was a very interesting person with a broad range of interests. And actually, he died in the late May near Bakhmut, and in April there were also these three internationalists, the Russian anarchist
Dmitry Petrov,
called also Ilya Leshy, Irish socialist Finbar Kaferki, and African American um, activist Andrew Cooper Harris, who also died in this Bakhmut grinder. So, and the same we have like lots of people from the unions who also lost their lives in precisely in this battle. That was something like a for the Russian side it was like a prestige battle to get at least something that they can present as victory. And for Ukrainian side it was part of this strategic um, way of containing Russian forces and actually inflicting more casualties on their side. So in order not to lose any other part of Ukraine.
I asked Dennis about the conflict between Prigozhin and the Russian Defense Ministry, and also about the morale of the Russian troops themselves.
Maybe for them now, the struggle, the war with Ukraine isn't so important as their inner struggles. Yes, so yes, there were these recent reports of the skirmishes between Wagner and the regular Russian military, and they even captured some officer as their prisoner of war, like the Russian officer captured by Wagner group. So this is clearly a start of some power struggle inside Russia, and well, all these stakeholders, including Prigozhin, they have their own political ambitions, and they try to use actually this war where they are restlessly killing Ukrainian people as a means to strengthen their position inside the Russian power vertical. So maybe some of them are also counting on maybe what happens in case if Putin's regime will collapse. So who will fill in the power vacuum? And then you will have like lots of very vicious people like the Wagner Group, with weapons, with combat experience, and with no moral boundaries for what they are doing. They committed numerous war crimes in Ukraine. They committed numerous war crimes in Syria, in Mali, in Sudan, in other African countries. These are people that are heavily so in a way, it's something that reminds us of some most notorious SS groups inside Nazi war machine. So they have both people coming from far right background, outright neo Nazis like the Rusich group, and they also use convicts from the prisons as their cannon fodder.
Dennis explained who the Rusik group is.
Yeah, so it's a Nazi group commanded by a guy called Milchakov, who actually became very notorious a decade ago, where he was bragging about killing stray dogs, about killing Ukrainian soldiers, and so on. So, and they are now part of the Wagner. Um, so more or less, yes, it's something very telling, because we have been speaking a lot about the far right in different Eastern European countries, and yes, the far right are very dangerous, including the Ukrainian far right. But behind all these talks that were so much concentrated about what's happening in Ukraine, many on the global scale have lost um, the understanding that the situation in Russia is much, much worse.
States, right. You know, we have one fascist group here, America First, and they had their national conference shortly after the invasion started, and they were chanting Putin, Putin, Putin. And then you have people like Tucker Carlson, who just yesterday had a show in which he basically blamed Ukraine for the dam being blown up.
Yes, I've read something of your articles on the subject, and I completely agree. I think that it's um, we overlooked, not we, but many have overlooked this actual importance of Putin's Russia as some kind of beacon for the international far right that brings together European far right populists and ultra conservatives, from Marine Le Pen in France to Viktor Orban in Hungary, um, the far right in the US, Trumpist Republicans, but even more, as you mentioned, outright neo-fascists and neo-Nazis, and also authoritarian forces throughout the world, like from both.
These are some of the issues regarding Putin's world role that we will be discussing in the second part of this interview. And we're also going to discuss how a regenerated socialist movement can deal with the issue of the war in Ukraine from the point of view of the class struggle in Russia, in Ukraine, and in the United States.